There are moments in life when you feel like you're chasing someone who keeps slipping away. Not because you're not worthy, not because you don't have value, but because the person you're dealing with is locked inside their own fortress of fear. You try to love them, but they retreat. You reach out and they pull away. And if you've ever dealt with an avoidant, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like running after the wind. You can feel it, but you can't hold it. But what if I told you that the dynamic could be reversed? What if I told you that you don't have to be the one chasing, begging, or proving yourself? What if the very person who avoids, withdraws, and hides suddenly turns around and starts chasing you? Because you've awakened something deep inside them that no one else dared to touch. 7 words, 7 moves, 7 days. That's all it takes. Not manipulation, not games, not pretending to be someone you're not, but rather a powerful shift in the way you show up, the way you speak, and the way you command energy in the relationship. Avoidants don't pull away because they don't care. They pull away because caring terrifies them. It shakes the foundation they've built to protect themselves. Love feels like a battlefield, and to them, closeness equals danger. But here's the truth. If you know how to flip that script, if you know how to ignite that spark inside them, suddenly the very fear that made them run turns into the fuel that makes them chase. You see, people think attraction is about words, about charm, about playing the right games. But attraction at its core is about energy. It's about what you radiate. It's about how you show up when someone else retreats. It's about the subtle, unspoken power you hold, not when you demand attention, but when you become the gravitational force they cannot escape. So here's what I'm going to give you today. 8 key points that are not just ideas, they're strategies, they're transformations, they're shifts you can apply starting right now. 7 words, 7 moves, 7 days. And I promise you, if you absorb this, if you don't just listen but embody it, you will flip the avoidant so hard they won't know what hit them. They'll go from running away to chasing you with an intensity you never thought possible. But listen closely, this is not about breaking them down. This is not about manipulation. This is about flipping the switch inside you so that their defenses no longer control the game. The avoidant doesn't need to be fixed. You don't need to chase their healing. What you need is to rise in your own power, to embody a presence that makes them feel safe enough to approach, but strong enough to never tolerate breadcrumbs again. If you're ready to stop chasing, stop begging, and stop shrinking, then lean in, because what you're about to learn could be the turning point you've been waiting for. The very first step to flipping the avoidant dynamic begins with one principle that most people overlook: your energy sets the tone, not theirs. Too often, when someone is dealing with an avoidant, they unconsciously surrender control of the emotional atmosphere. The avoidant pulls back, and suddenly you're scrambling, texting more, over-explaining, analyzing every silence, trying desperately to fill the gap they've created. And in doing so, you hand them the power. They retreat, and you chase. They withhold, and you perform. They step back, and you step forward. This dance becomes predictable, exhausting, and destructive. But the key, the very first move you must master, is to flip that equation completely. Instead of matching their retreat with pursuit, you match their retreat with grounded presence. That means when they step back, you don't flinch, you don't collapse, you don't panic and grasp for validation. Instead, you breathe, you center yourself, you remind yourself, I am the anchor, not the storm. Think about this: avoidants are used to people reacting to their distance. It's their unconscious test. They create space, and most people rush to close it. Why? Because distance triggers fear of abandonment in the other person. And when you rush to close that gap, the avoidant unconsciously confirms their worldview. See, closeness equals suffocation. If I give someone a little space, they'll try to consume me. This validates their fear and keeps the cycle alive. But imagine flipping that script. Imagine the avoidant stepping back, and instead of chasing, you hold your ground. You don't punish them. You don't lash out. You don't beg. You simply remain steady, calm, and self-possessed. This creates a shockwave in their nervous system. Suddenly, their unconscious test fails. They step back, and you don't crumble. They expected chaos, but they got calm. They expected neediness, but they got power. This is the first move in flipping the dynamic. Hold your frame when they pull away. It sounds simple, but it requires a radical shift in mindset. Instead of making their withdrawal about you, did I say something wrong? Do they not love me? Am I losing them? You interpret their behavior through strength. You tell yourself their withdrawal is their pattern. It is not my identity. It is not a measurement of my worth. I remain grounded no matter what storm they ride inside themselves. Now here's where it gets powerful. When you stop chasing, the avoidant is forced to confront the silence they've created. For the first time, they're not in control of the push-pull. You're not dancing to their rhythm. And in that stillness, something extraordinary happens. The avoidant feels the absence of your energy moving toward them. They feel the space they created, but instead of relief, they feel curiosity, then discomfort, and eventually longing, because deep down, avoidants crave connection. Their fear is not that they don't want love, it's that love feels dangerous. But when you refuse to play into the old cycle, you send a subconscious message. I am safe. I am steady. I will not chase you, but I will not abandon myself either. That message pierces through their defenses like nothing else. Here's the practical application. The next time the avoidant pulls back, maybe they don't text for a day, maybe they cancel plans, maybe they grow cold. You don't flood them with messages or emotional reactions. Instead, you match their distance with emotional composure. You live your life. You focus on your own joy. You continue your mission, your purpose, your growth. You send a signal not through words but through presence that you are unshakable. And this doesn't mean you play cold games. This isn't about withholding love or punishing them. It's about choosing not to betray yourself in response to their patterns. Because let's be honest, when you abandon your center to chase someone else's avoidance, you wound yourself twice. Once through their distance, and again through your own desperation. But when you hold steady, you don't double the pain. You reclaim your power. This is the first shift that flips the avoidant. They expect pursuit, they expect drama, they expect emotional fireworks. But when you meet their retreat with calm strength, you awaken a new energy inside them: respect, attraction, curiosity, and eventually pursuit. Remember, the goal isn't to manipulate them into chasing. The goal is to reframe the dance so that you are not enslaved to their patterns. And ironically, the moment you stop chasing them is the moment they start moving toward you. Because nothing unsettles an avoidant more than realizing they can't control the rhythm anymore. You've become the still point in their storm. And in that stillness, you become magnetic. That's the first move. That's the foundation. You hold steady when they pull away. You set the frame. You own your power. And from that point on, every other strategy becomes 10 times more effective because you're no longer the one running after them. You've already flipped the script. Once you've mastered the first move, holding your ground when the avoidant pulls away, the second step is all about communication with precision and power. This is where the 7 words part of the formula begins to show up, because believe it or not, words can either reinforce the avoidant's fear or dismantle it. Every syllable you speak carries weight, and when you learn how to use language as energy instead of a desperate plea, you turn conversation into magnetism. Here's the truth most people miss: avoidants aren't running from you, they're running from what they believe closeness represents: pressure, demand, loss of freedom. So, when you speak in ways that feel heavy, needy, or suffocating, it triggers their deepest reflex: escape. But when you learn to communicate lightly, directly, and powerfully, something shifts. Suddenly, you're not another person trying to tie them down. You become the rare person who makes closeness feel safe. Now, what does this look like in practice? It starts with brevity. Avoidants tune out long emotional speeches. When you try to explain your feelings in paragraphs, they don't hear your love, they hear a demand, they feel cornered. So instead of drowning them in words, you use concise, powerful statements that create impact. Think of it like throwing pebbles into a pond instead of dumping a truckload of rocks. One lands, ripples, and sticks in memory. The other overwhelms and makes them swim for cover. For example, instead of saying, "I feel like you've been distant lately, and it makes me insecure, and I don't know where we stand, and I just wish you'd open up more," you say something as simple as, "I value closeness, but I also value freedom." Both can exist. 7 words, yet the message lands with weight. You're not chasing. You're not blaming. You're not demanding. You're positioning yourself as someone who can hold duality, someone who isn't trying to cage them, but invite them. Or instead of panicking when they withdraw and saying, "Why didn't you text me back? Did I do something wrong?" You use a line like, "I trust space doesn't mean disconnection." Again, just a handful of words, but it flips the emotional energy. Suddenly, you're the person who can handle distance without insecurity. That makes you magnetic, because avoidance secretly craves someone strong enough to survive their storms without collapsing. This is where the second move becomes life-changing. Speak with clarity, confidence, and sparing intensity. Not too much, not too heavy, not too desperate. Your words become like a spark instead of a wildfire. And when you master this, the avoidant doesn't feel suffocated, they feel intrigued. But let's take this even deeper. Words are not just about what you say. They're about what you don't say. The pauses, the silence, the moments where you let your energy fill the space instead of rushing to fill it with noise. Avoidants are hypersensitive to emotional pressure, and silence is often more powerful than 100 explanations. When you resist the urge to over-clarify, you give them room to step forward. And when they step forward, they do it by choice, not compulsion. Think about this: what feels more powerful? Someone bombarding you with, "Do you love me? Are you sure? Tell me again. I need to hear it." Or someone looking you in the eyes and simply saying, "I know what we have is real." One is pressure, the other is power. This doesn't mean you suppress your needs. It means you learn to express them with elegance. You strip away the excess. You give the avoidant something clear, digestible, undeniable. And in doing so, you disrupt their entire cycle of fear. Here's the irony: avoidants are terrified of words being weapons. They've often grown up in homes where words meant criticism, expectation, or control. So, when you use language as inspiration instead of control, you rewire their association. Your words don't feel like chains, they feel like wings. They feel light, refreshing, and safe. So, how do you practice this? Start small. Next time you feel the urge to send a long, desperate text, pause, breathe. Then ask yourself, how can I express the same truth in one clear, powerful line? Distill the essence, remove the fluff. Let the words carry strength without weight. Over time, this practice rewires not only the dynamic but also your self-image. You stop seeing yourself as someone who has to explain or beg to be understood. Instead, you become someone who speaks like a leader, someone who communicates from abundance instead of fear. And that shift is magnetic, not just to the avoidant, but to anyone. This is why key point 2 matters so much. Because once you learn to speak with power instead of panic, you stop reinforcing the avoidant's fears. You stop confirming their narrative that closeness equals overwhelm. And instead, you plant a new story inside them that love can feel light, safe, and irresistible. 7 words, 7 moves, 7 days. The first move was holding your ground when they retreat. The second is communicating with brevity, clarity, and unshakable presence. And together, these 2 moves already begin to flip the dynamic so strongly that the avoidant starts to lean in, not because you forced them, but because you've become the rare person who makes them feel free even in connection. If the first move is about holding your ground, and the second is about speaking with power, the third is about embodying something that flips the avoidant's inner wiring completely: mystery and unpredictability. Avoidants crave freedom. They fear being trapped. And one of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to love them is becoming too predictable, too available, too consistent in a way that screams, "I'm always here, I'll wait forever, I'll make myself smaller just so you feel comfortable." That level of predictability may feel like loyalty to you, but to an avoidant, it feels like suffocation. Why? Because they already assume closeness equals loss of autonomy. When you show up in a way that is constant but self-sacrificial, it confirms their deepest fear: if I let this person in, I'll lose myself. So how do you flip that script? You become unpredictable, not in a toxic way, but in a way that radiates mystery and self-sufficiency. You show them that you are not a static presence waiting on their approval. You are dynamic. You are in motion. You are living a life so rich, so alive, that they cannot box you in or pin you down. Think about the magnetism of mystery. When you know everything about someone, when their every move is predictable, attraction fades. But when someone has depth, layers you haven't fully discovered, it pulls you in. That's what you must embody with an avoidant. Don't let them read you like an open book. Let them feel that there are chapters of you they haven't even touched yet. Here's a practical example. Let's say you normally respond instantly to their texts. That consistency might feel like devotion to you, but to them, it's predictability. Instead, one day you don't respond right away, not because you're playing games, but because you're genuinely living your life. Maybe you're at the gym. Maybe you're in a deep conversation with a friend. Maybe you're writing, creating, or building something for yourself. When you finally respond, it's with calm, confident energy, not apology. This subtly signals, I am not sitting by the phone waiting for you. I am living, and if you want to be part of my world, you'll have to lean in. Another example, instead of always initiating plans, you pull back and let them come toward you. And when they do, you don't always say yes immediately. You consider your schedule. You evaluate your priorities. You let them feel that your life is full, abundant, and not hanging on their availability. This creates a magnetic tension. They feel that being close to you is a privilege, not a guarantee. Now here's the beauty. Mystery doesn't mean being fake or hiding who you are. It means not overexposing yourself. It means letting curiosity work in your favor. Share enough to connect, but not so much that you strip away the intrigue. For example, instead of dumping your entire life story on them in one night, share one captivating piece and let them wonder about the rest. Instead of explaining every thought, drop a line that hints at depth. That's a story for another day. This creates a sense of anticipation, and anticipation is the fuel of attraction. Avoidants expect people to bend over backward to make them feel comfortable. When you refuse to play that game, when you keep them guessing in subtle ways, you flip the dynamic. They stop seeing you as another pursuer they can control and start seeing you as someone they must work to understand, someone they must earn. And that shift plants the seed of pursuit. Because here's the secret: avoidants chase what they can't fully predict. They chase what feels just out of reach. Not because they want games, but because their nervous system is wired to crave freedom. When you embody mystery, you give them freedom. Not by abandoning them, but by refusing to collapse into total availability. You show them, I am mine first. If you want me, you must step forward. And the irony, the moment you stop making yourself predictable is the moment you become safe to them. Why? Because you're showing them you won't suffocate them. You won't abandon your own life to orbit around theirs. That gives them space. That gives them permission. And in that space, they feel drawn to you like a moth to a flame. So, the third move is this: become the mystery they can't stop trying to solve. Not through manipulation, not through dishonesty, but through living fully, holding some of yourself back, and radiating the kind of energy that makes them curious, hungry, and restless without you. When they can't predict you, they can't control you. And when they can't control you, they must chase you. That is the paradox of power in relationships with avoidance. You stop running toward them, and suddenly they start running toward you. If you want to flip the avoidant, you need to master one thing most people neglect: emotional self-sufficiency. This is not just about pretending to be strong. It's about truly cultivating a foundation within yourself so powerful that you no longer depend on their responses to dictate your sense of worth. Avoidants are masters at testing emotional resilience. They don't always do it consciously, but their pullbacks, their silences, their cold streaks, they're all subconscious ways of asking, can you handle me at my worst? Can you survive when I retreat? Can you stand strong when I crumble? Most people fail this test. They react, they spiral, they send desperate texts, they plead for reassurance, they collapse under the pressure. And when that happens, the avoidance inner fear gets validated. See, closeness means chaos. If I let someone get too close, they'll break down and demand I fix them. But here's the flip. When you show up with emotional self-sufficiency, when you demonstrate that you can thrive regardless of their mood swings, you disarm the avoidance fear completely. You send a new message, one they're not used to receiving: I desire you, but I don't need you to survive. I want connection, but I won't lose myself if you step back. That message is magnetic. Think about it. What's more attractive, someone who panics the second you pull away, or someone who remains calm, collected, and even radiant in the midst of distance? The second one every time, because desperation is repelling, but self-sufficiency is irresistible. Now, Emotional self-sufficiency doesn't mean shutting down or becoming cold. It doesn't mean building walls and pretending you don't care. It means you've cultivated such a strong relationship with yourself, your purpose, your passions, your values, that your entire emotional world doesn't collapse based on whether the avoidant is warm or distant that day. You remain grounded. You remain alive. You remain you. Let me give you a practical image. Imagine the avoidant pulls back, doesn't text for a day or two. Most people would sit by the phone, anxiously refreshing, spiraling into self-doubt. But emotional self-sufficiency looks different. Instead of waiting, you fill your day. You go for a run, you hit the gym, you meet with friends. You dive into your work, you practice a skill, you meditate, you fill your cup with so much richness that by the time the avoidant comes back around, you're glowing. Not because they validated you, but because you validated yourself. And when they see that glow, it unsettles them in the best way. They expected you to collapse. They expected neediness. But instead, they see strength. They see independence. They see someone they can't break down with silence. That creates respect. That creates admiration. And slowly, it creates pursuit. Here's the deeper truth. Avoidants are terrified of being responsible for someone else's emotions. They fear being engulfed, trapped, or smothered by your needs. So when you prove to them that you are emotionally self-sufficient, you eliminate their greatest fear. They no longer see closeness as a prison. They see it as freedom. They see you as someone who can stand beside them without demanding they carry your entire weight. This doesn't mean you never express needs. Of course you do. But the difference is in the energy behind it. When you come from desperation, your needs feel like demands. When you come from strength, your needs feel like invitations. I'd love to connect with you tonight hits differently than, why didn't you call me? Do you even care about me? Both communicate desire, but one radiates power, the other radiates insecurity, and the avoidant runs from insecurity. So how do you cultivate this emotional self-sufficiency? You invest in yourself. You build routines that ground you. You develop passions that light you up. You surround yourself with supportive friends who remind you of your worth. You journal, meditate, exercise, learn, create. You pour into yourself so deeply that your cup is overflowing. And when your cup overflows, you no longer approach the avoidant as someone begging for drops. You approach them as someone offering abundance. That changes the entire energy dynamic. Imagine it like this. The avoidant is used to people chasing them like they're the oasis in the desert. But when you show up as the oasis, when your energy radiates fullness and vitality, they're the ones who feel thirsty. They're the ones who feel the pull. And suddenly the script is flipped. They're no longer running from you. They're running toward you. So the fourth move is this: become emotionally self-sufficient. Detach your sense of worth from their validation. Thrive in your own presence. Show them that you are whole with or without them. And when you do, you will trigger something powerful inside them, the realization that you are not just another pursuer. They are lucky to have a chance at your light. And here's the irony. The moment you no longer need them is the moment they start needing you, because self-sufficiency doesn't repel, it attracts. It creates gravity. And gravity is what makes the avoidant stop running and start chasing. If you want to flip the avoidant, you must learn to master something that most people completely underestimate: the art of boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are not ultimatums. Boundaries are clarity. They are the invisible framework that communicates to the avoidant: this is who I am. This is what I allow. This is how I expect to be treated. And when you hold boundaries with power, you do something that almost no one else does for them. You teach them respect. Here's the problem. Most people dealing with avoidance abandon their boundaries in the hope of keeping the connection alive. They tolerate canceled plans. They excuse coldness. They settle for breadcrumbs of affection. They say yes when they mean no. Why? Because they're afraid that enforcing a boundary will scare the avoidant away. But the irony is this: the very lack of boundaries is what makes the avoidant lose respect and ultimately lose attraction. Avoidants are not drawn to people who bend and break just to keep them happy. They're drawn to people who stand firm in their value. Because deep down, the avoidant knows that if you can't hold your own ground, you'll never be able to hold theirs. So what does a boundary look like in practice? It's simple but powerful. It's you saying, I won't tolerate disrespect. It's you deciding, if you cancel last minute without a valid reason, I won't rearrange my world again for you. It's you declaring, my time matters, my energy matters, my love matters, and I'm not handing it over cheaply. Now, this doesn't mean you become rigid or harsh. Boundaries aren't about punishment. They're about self-respect. When you hold them with calm, centered energy, they don't push people away. They filter out the wrong ones and draw the right ones closer. Think about this when the avoidant withdraws. Instead of sending 10 texts begging for answers, your boundary might look like this. I'm open to connection, but I won't chase silence. That one line communicates everything. You're available for healthy interaction, but you won't sacrifice your dignity. Or when they come back around after disappearing, instead of instantly rewarding them with affection, you calmly say, I value consistency. If you want my time, show up with presence. That's not punishment, that's power. You're stating your standard. You're showing them that access to you is earned, not guaranteed. Here's the paradox: avoidants secretly crave boundaries. On the surface, they resist them because boundaries feel like pressure. But deep down, they need them because boundaries equal safety. Boundaries prove to them that you're not chaotic, that you won't allow dysfunction to spiral unchecked. And when you hold boundaries with grace, they begin to relax around you because you're showing them that connection with you doesn't mean endless drama. It means clarity. Boundaries also flip the dynamic because they awaken the avoidance pursuit instinct. When you say no, when you hold a line, when you refuse to accept crumbs, you instantly increase your value in their eyes. Why? Because human beings, including avoidants, value what they have to earn. If you give away your presence too cheaply, they take it for granted. But when you require effort, they invest, and what we invest in, we value. Think of it like this: if someone handed you a diamond for free, you might admire it, but you wouldn't treasure it the same way you would if you worked for years to earn it. The same principle applies here. When you uphold boundaries, you require the avoidant to earn your closeness, and the very act of earning makes them cherish you more. Of course, holding boundaries requires courage. It requires the willingness to risk losing them in order to never lose yourself. But here's the truth: if holding a boundary causes them to leave, they were never truly available in the first place. Boundaries don't scare away the right people, they scare away the wrong ones. And if the avoidant is capable of real love, your boundaries will not repel them, they will awaken them. This is why boundaries are the fifth move in flipping the dynamic. They stop you from falling into the trap of endless pursuit. They prevent you from sacrificing your dignity. They transform you from the pursuer into the prize. And when the avoidant feels that shift, when they realize that you will not tolerate anything less than respect, they begin to step up. They begin to lean in. They begin to chase. Because the person with boundaries is not easy to keep. They are valuable. They are rare. They are unforgettable. And that's exactly what you must become if you want to flip the avoidant so hard they can't stop chasing you. If you want to flip the avoidant, you must understand this: avoidants are not moved by your desperation. They're moved by your consistency of growth. This is the sixth move: becoming a person in constant evolution. Because nothing flips the avoidant harder than realizing that while they were running, you were rising. Here's the reality: avoidants are attracted to strength, vitality, and expansion. But when they see you stagnant, waiting for them to change, waiting for them to show up, waiting for them to finally give you the love you deserve, they lose respect. Why? Because to an avoidant, stagnation looks like dependence. It looks like you've put your entire life on hold for them. And if there's one thing an avoidant cannot stand, it's feeling like someone's world collapses without them. That equals suffocation. But the moment you step into consistent growth, you reverse the script. Instead of waiting, you're creating. Instead of freezing, you're moving. Instead of shrinking to fit into their hesitation, you're expanding so massively that they can't help but notice. Imagine this: the avoidant pulls back, thinking they have time, thinking you'll be stuck in the same place when they decide to return. But when they finally glance your way, they see a new version of you. Maybe you've started a fitness journey and your body radiates energy. Maybe you've launched a project, a business, or a passion that lights you up. Maybe your social circle has grown, your confidence has multiplied, your presence has intensified. Suddenly, you are no longer the same person they thought they could control with silence. You've evolved, and nothing scares an avoidant more, in the best way, than realizing they are at risk of losing someone who refuses to stand still. Growth creates gravitational pull. People chase what is in motion. Think of a river. It flows, it moves, it carves valleys, it sustains life. You can't ignore it. It draws you in. Now think of stagnant water. It collects dust. It breeds mosquitoes. It goes unnoticed. Which one attracts more attention? The river. And that's who you must become. So how do you embody this growth? You commit to self-mastery. You commit to becoming 1% better every single day. You learn new skills, not for validation, but for expansion. You hit the gym, not just for aesthetics, but for strength. You read, you study, you travel, you build experiences that deepen your character. You invest in your spiritual, emotional, and mental growth. You become someone whose very presence communicates progress. Here's the secret: when you're in motion, you become unpredictable. The avoidant no longer knows what to expect from you. They can't box you in as the person who will always be waiting, always be available, always be begging for attention. Instead, they're confronted with someone who is outgrowing the old patterns, someone who is building a life so vibrant that it demands pursuit. And let's be clear, this growth is not about pretending. It's not about posting fake highlights just to trigger jealousy. That's superficial. This is about deep, authentic transformation. It's about loving yourself enough to evolve whether they notice or not. And ironically, the more genuine your growth, the more undeniable it becomes. They will notice. They will feel it. They will sense the energy shift. Here's a powerful example. Let's say they've been distant for a week. Instead of chasing, you've been working on yourself. You've started new habits. You've been glowing. When they finally reach out, you're not bitter, you're radiant. You share something new you've been working on, and suddenly they feel it. You're no longer orbiting around them, they're orbiting around you. That shift is magnetic. Growth also redefines your boundaries, because when you evolve, you naturally outgrow situations that don't serve you. And the avoidant senses this. They realize that if they don't step up, they might get left behind, not because you're punishing them, but because you're ascending. And that fear of loss becomes fuel for pursuit. But here's the deeper magic. Growth heals you. It shifts your focus from, will they choose me, to, I'm already choosing me. And when you choose yourself consistently, the avoidant no longer holds the power. You do. And the energy of self-chosen growth is intoxicating. So the sixth move is simple but life-changing. Grow so much that the avoidant has no choice but to chase. Evolve so consistently that they realize every day they hesitate, they risk losing a more powerful, more radiant version of you. Because the truth is this: people don't chase what is easy to hold. They chase what is in motion. They chase what evolves. They chase what they can't predict. And when you commit to growth, you become unstoppable. You become the river they cannot ignore. And in the end, that river will pull them in, not because you begged for it, but because your flow became irresistible. The seventh and final move is the energy of inevitability. This is the force that flips the avoidant harder than anything else. It's not about proving, pleading, or persuading. It's about embodying the truth that you are already inevitable, that your worth is non-negotiable, that your presence, your love, your power cannot be overlooked, dismissed, or replaced. Avoidants are wired to believe they can slip away unnoticed. They think they can retreat into silence, into distance, and that you'll still be there, waiting with open arms when they feel like coming back. That illusion gives them control. But when you step into inevitability, you shatter that illusion. You radiate the energy that says, I am not an option you can put on hold. I am the path. I am the prize. I am the storm you cannot outrun. So how do you cultivate this? You start by owning your unshakable self-belief. This isn't arrogance. It's certainty. It's the certainty that whether they choose you or not, your life is already expanding. It's the certainty that you bring irreplaceable value to every connection. It's the certainty that no matter who walks away, you remain whole, radiant, and unstoppable. That certainty is magnetic. The avoidant, deep down, fears intimacy because they fear being consumed, controlled, or exposed. But when they encounter someone who is inevitable, someone whose worth does not depend on them, They can't use distance as a weapon anymore. Instead, that distance boomerangs back at them because the more they try to escape, the more they feel your pull. Not because you're chasing, but because you've become unavoidable. Think about the sun. You don't beg the sun to rise. You don't chase it across the sky. You don't plead for its warmth. It simply shines. It shows up every single day, inevitable, unignorable, unstoppable. And whether you embrace it or hide from it, the sun remains. That's the energy you must embody. You show up in your life with such consistency, such power, such radiance that the avoidant realizes you are not fading, you are blazing. Now here's the key: inevitability is not about them. It's about you. It's about stepping into a level of self-mastery, self-love, and self-certainty where their opinion no longer determines your value. And ironically, when you detach from needing their validation, that's when they begin to crave yours. Because suddenly, you're not the one asking, "Do you still love me?" They're the one asking, "Do I still have a chance with you?" Picture this moment. The avoidant pulls back, thinking the old cycle will play out. They expect you to chase, to panic, to over-explain. But instead, you lean back into your inevitability. You keep living, keep thriving, keep shining. Days pass, they check your energy, still unshaken. They test your boundaries, still solid. They try silence, still radiant. And then it hits them: you are not waiting. You are not chasing. You are not bending. You are inevitable. And that realization flips them harder than any words you could say. This is why the title of this journey is 7 words, 7 moves, 7 days. Because it's not about gimmicks. It's about transformation. It's about you stepping into the version of yourself that makes pursuit the only option. When you carry inevitability, the avoidant no longer sees you as a choice. They see you as destiny. And let's be honest, this isn't just about flipping the avoidant. This is about flipping you. It's about flipping your mindset, your habits, your identity, until you no longer recognize the old version of yourself who begged for crumbs. It's about walking with such grounded certainty that even if the avoidant never chases, you're still winning. Because inevitability means you've already chosen yourself, already crowned yourself, already claimed your throne. That's the final move. Not waiting, not shrinking, not proving, simply being inevitable. Because inevitability is not loud, it's not desperate, it's not dramatic, it's steady, it's consistent, it's undeniable. And when you own it, you become the force they cannot escape. So hear me now: the avoidant may run, they may hide, they may pull back into silence. But sooner or later, they'll look up, and there you'll be, radiant, certain, powerful, unshaken, inevitable. And when that moment comes, the chase begins, not because you demanded it, but because your very being left them no other choice. We've walked through the 7 words, the 7 moves, the 7 days that have the power to flip the avoidant so hard they chase you. And by now, you've realized this journey was never just about them. It was always about you, about reclaiming your power, about breaking free from the chains of waiting, begging, and doubting yourself, about stepping into the version of you who no longer needs to be chosen, because you've already chosen yourself. And in that moment, the energy shifts. In that moment, the chase begins. What you've discovered is that love isn't about clinging, it's about creating gravity. The avoidant doesn't respond to panic, but they can't ignore presence. They don't chase desperation, but they are drawn to growth, strength, and self-mastery. Every move you've learned here rewires the dynamic. Silence becomes strength. Boundaries become attraction. Self-growth becomes magnetism. Inevitability becomes power. You've armed yourself not with games, but with principles that transform you from the one who waits into the one who leads. And let's be clear, this isn't manipulation. This isn't tricking someone into loving you. This is about you becoming the kind of person who naturally commands pursuit, respect, and devotion. It's about shifting from "will they" to "I already am," because when you embody the 7 moves, you don't just flip the avoidant, you flip your own destiny. You flip the script of your life from powerless to powerful, from waiting to leading, from scarcity to abundance. So here's the challenge I leave you with. Don't just listen. Don't just nod your head. Don't just feel inspired for a moment. Take action. Take the 7 moves and live them. Apply them in your relationships, in your work, in your daily life. Make growth your default. Make boundaries your strength. Make self-belief your identity. And watch what happens, not just with the avoidant, but with every single person you encounter. Because when you step into inevitability, the world begins to chase you. And finally, remember this truth. The avoidant is not your enemy. Their distance, their silence, their fear. It was never about you. It was about them. But what you've gained here is far greater than their pursuit. You've gained the blueprint to become magnetic, unshakable, inevitable. And when you live this way, the chase is no longer your goal. It's simply the byproduct. Because the real win isn't flipping the avoidant. The real win is flipping yourself. And that, my friend, is the beginning of a life you cannot even imagine. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. I don't take your time, your focus, or your energy for granted. You could have been anywhere else, but you chose to be here, to grow, to push yourself to the next level. And that alone proves something powerful. You are ready for change. Remember, these 7 words, 7 moves, and 7 days are not just strategies for dealing with an avoidant. They are a mirror showing you who you can become when you step into your power. They are a roadmap, not just to flipping someone else's behavior, but to flipping your own mindset, your own self-belief, your own destiny. So I want to leave you with this. Don't let this just be another motivational talk you heard and forgot. Let this be the turning point. Let this be the spark that sets your soul on fire. Let this be the proof that you don't need permission to rise. You only need the decision to rise. If this message moved you, then stay connected. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs it, and keep coming back, because together we're building a space where power replaces fear, where growth replaces stagnation, and where love, true love, begins with self. Until next time, stay strong, stay inevitable, and remember, you don't just deserve love, you are love. And when you embody that truth, the chase is no longer something you wait for. It's something that comes to you effortlessly. Thank you, and goodbye for now.